隊長、先遣隊が上陸して2時間、音沙汰なしです。
第2第3調査隊に準備を急がせろ。
はあ。
戦士隊を打ち負かし世界を脅かす悪魔の島、何としてでもその実態をマーレに持ち帰るのだ。捕まれ悪魔。
Hey guys, Morpheus Christus here. In light of one of my most recent videos, Dog Culture and Capitalism, it seems I've been met with some moderate criticism by an anti-dog YouTuber who goes by the moniker Dog Culture Review. While I'm currently in the process of making a documentary about the Soviet Union and why it wasn't communist, I figured in this interim of time I'd put together a quick response video. Bear in mind, this will be my one and only response to this Dog Culture Review individual. Without further ado, let's get into this.
Guys, you gotta remember, dog culture is disguised. So when you look at dog culture and it's like, oh yeah, that's capitalism. That's all these people trying to brag about all this money they have and running around with their cool looking dogs. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. The dog ownership in America, it's not all like glitz and glamour. A big part of it is dog owners literally hate a lot of their life with their dogs, but they're filled with guilt and shame, and they continue to have all of these habits because it becomes an addiction. It becomes just a way of life to live like this, and our society continues to incentivize it. So there's a lot more than just the capitalist and look at me with all my free money to think about. So when we think about dog ownership, like as the way it used to be, like the people that have dogs, those are the people with all the extra money. Well, a big part of dog culture right now is paid for by tax programs, 501c3 shelters, and other places like that. Many free services, government services you can use for your dog. I'm just showing you this page for some examples. But many of these assistance programs, a big part of it is for people that are already poor, and then they got a dog, now they need more money. Well, they can go apply to one of these places. And you see where it says right here, non-profits? Well, when one of these non-profit agencies spends money on dogs and dog owners, they just write that off on their company taxes. And then all of the country pays for it.
No, dog culture isn't disguised as capitalism. Dog culture is merely one of the many myriads of mechanisms which capitalism uses to exert its influence upon the masses. The dictionary definition of disguise refers to the act of altering one's appearance in order to come off as something completely different. When it comes to dog culture, it certainly doesn't need to disguise itself as capitalism, as it's pretty much an open secret that the pet industry as a whole is a multi-billion-dollar business in which private oligarchs are the top beneficiaries. This is further evidenced when you said that most dog owners are miserable with their lives, which is understandable. Dogs are marketed to the masses by private corporations as the ultimate miracle that can resolve the systemic problems and dysfunctions of a capitalist-laden society. The fact that financial assistance programs exist to help offset the costs for low-income Americans who own dogs is further proof that we live in a capitalist society. Instead of implementing reforms to provide living wages for all working people, the most the government is willing to do is implement mediocre welfare programs to make capitalism somewhat less burdensome instead of outright reforming the system to make society more socialistic. The American government in this equation is merely an enabler of dog culture, but it is not the apotheosis of it. That would be the top 1% who own the means of production, or as Marx would call them, the bourgeoisie.
The people that have dogs, those are the people with all the extra money. Well, a big part of dog culture right now is paid for by tax programs, 501c3 shelters, and other places like that. Many free services, government services you can use for your dog. I'm just showing you this page for some examples. But many of these assistance programs, a big part of it is for people that are already poor, and then they got a dog, now they need more money. Well, they can go apply to one of these places.
No, what you described has nothing to do with actual communism and everything to do with capitalism. Just because some pet companies are able to get tax write-offs from the government doesn't obviate the reality that these corporations are benefiting primarily from working-class consumers purchasing their product. Compare the average salary of Mars CEO John Franklin Mars, which is $46.4 billion, to that of US President Donald Trump, $6.8 billion. The differences are essentially night and day.
Not part of a true capitalist society. When you buy a dog, sure, somebody's probably making a profit off of it, but you can't make a profit off the dog. The downstream results of dog ownership are not the same as the downstream results of other capitalist concepts. So that's why I'm showing you these weed eaters. This could be a chainsaw or an economy car, but when you buy a weed eater, yeah, it's part of a profit-based system because somebody sold you the weed eater, but you can also save money or make money with your weed eater. You can turn a profit. You can use capitalist concepts to go improve your neighborhood. You can teach your offspring or your siblings to use this, and they can go make a few bucks, or they can go improve their property with this. That's a capitalist concept. But with
Government isn't the problem. Capitalism is. Correct, the mainstream consumer is not the primary profiteer of dog culture. It is upper echelons of capitalist America who benefit the most, such as the CEO of Mars. And to tackle your weed eater example, I just want to start by saying that true socialists are not averse to innovation and entrepreneurship. These things are quintessential in maintaining a strong economy. What socialists take qualms with is wealth distribution and ownership over means of production. For instance, if I, hypothetically speaking, owned a landscaping business, the tools I use on the job, i.e. my lawnmower, weed eater, leaf blower, as well as the vehicle I would use to transport my tools, would all be worker-owned, as I would be both the owner and the worker of that business. This isn't an example of capitalism, but of a worker cooperative. Cooperatives are perfectly compatible with socialism.
this is the downstream result of dog culture. So many pet owners form strong emotional bonds with their pets, according to Wikipedia in Boise. Go ahead and read this if you got some time. But again, they want you to be childless and alone because dogs, like a brood parasite, they're replacing humans. And if you just replace all these humans with dogs, like they say, you're not going to be able to continue capitalism.
Correct. Dogs have essentially become surrogate family members for many people in the US. And you are also right to an extent about the bit on capitalism no longer being able to function without its consumer base. However, capitalism is merely the means to an end of reverting society back to feudalism, a system where the masses of people are subject to the whim of landlords and nobles. I don't believe that dogs will spell the end of humanity, but modern man's obsession with them will undoubtedly diminish his quality of life.
So dog culture itself could be cured by proper capitalism. Give that some thought. So here's a picture of somebody's rental house. So dog culture wants you to live like this. Filthy, full of roaches, mosquitoes, bed bugs, filthy carpets. The landlord is having problems. And what is the downstream result of this? Increased renters insurance and increased rental rates. So dog culture, again, they want you to be poor. They want you to be alone. But hey, you got a bunch of dogs and you got a house that looks.
So-called proper capitalism is the oligarchic exploration of working people. There is no way to reform a system that was designed to fill the pockets of a select cabal of oligarchic elites. And your example of dog owners living in filth is emblematic of a society who has lost all forms of respect and dignity for itself. In a truly collectivist society where everyone shares a mutual ideal of looking out for each other's best interests, people would be much more mindful with the ways they present and conduct themselves. Nobody would subject themselves to such squalid living conditions because they would know that it could potentially yield a negative impact on the community around them. This again is another example of how individualism and capitalism ruin society.
Ownership, what do they want? They want you to live in filth. They want you to live in a house full of bugs. That's not capitalism. Maybe there's some competition with the local, pest removers, but that's not capitalism. Living in filth is not capitalism. That sounds like That sounds like almost every communist regime.
Yes, Jeff. Living in filth is undoubtedly an aspect of capitalism. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the TV show Hoarders. Where do you think those people developed their hoarding mentality from? It certainly wasn't from communism, since the world is yet to truly experience it. The so-called communist regimes of old were communist in name only. In reality, they were neo-feudalist, a concept I've explained several times on channel and in my upcoming documentary releasing next week. I'll cut things short here, as he basically just repeats himself ad infinitum throughout his video. For any of you interested in watching the whole thing, I will leave a link to it in the description box. With that said, I'd like to make a special shout out to Learning from Life with Ashley, K. Nunn, and the rest of the anti-dog crusaders for promoting my dogs and capitalism video. I never would have imagined that such a video would generate 300 plus views within 2 days. While I intend for this channel to be about anti-capitalist and pro-socialist content, dog culture is undoubtedly a cog in the machine of capitalism. So from time to time I will certainly put in the effort to critique dogs and dog culture, as they are undoubtedly an unneeded burden in an already dystopic society that is besotted with capitalism. Finally, as I stated in the beginning of the video, I'm in the process of producing a documentary which will delve into the feudalist anti-socialist undertones within the Soviet Union, so expect that one to come out no later than next week. Until next time, this is Morpheus Christus, signing off.